I'm Jason Pack, and this is Disorder, a podcast where we have concepts of a plan to unpack the hidden logic of seemingly bonkers conspiracy theories and the political worldviews and policy programs that they actually encode. On the one hand, my dear mega orderers, I get if you're very tired and even a little bit bored of conspiracy theories. We've all been hearing a lot about conspiracy theories, not just since 2016, but especially over the last few weeks since the US presidential debate. In fact, you could say that every movement in the polls in this election cycle has a conspiracy theory behind it. When Biden was doing very badly after the first debate with Trump, there was an allegation that there was a conspiracy to conceal from the state of the American people his physical health, and that his aides had conspired to keep his medical condition from the people. Now, over the last few weeks, Kamala has been tanking in the polls, and there is an accusation that there is a conspiracy on behalf of Republican donors to use cryptocurrency to buy bets on Trump in the betting markets to make it seem like he's doing better, and that he went from being an underdog in the beginning of October to being a favorite now. In every case, these conspiracy theories are calls to action for one side to rally its supporters to do a specific action, whether it's vote or block people from voting. You know, the conspiracy theory that tons of illegal aliens are voting, or the conspiracy theory that the mail-in ballots are rigged, and we're seeing that some sheriffs in different rural districts are blocking people from using the mail-in deposit ballot boxes because they don't want the Dems to rig the mail-in voting process. Even the mainstream accepted fundraising texts that I get say things like, Kamala is packing her bags in Pennsylvania. It's over. We're going to lose. But if you want us to stay in Pennsylvania, rush $188 and we will do a 5 times match to Dems for Pennsylvania. This is itself motivating via a conspiracy theory because Kamala is not packing up and leaving Pennsylvania. The whole race hinges on Pennsylvania, but the attempt to motivate a call to action on behalf of Democratic supporters uses a conspiracy theory to motivate them. So this race, probably more than any other in human history, and certainly more than in any other in presidential history, rather than being a debate about the issues, in other words, I'm going to raise taxes on this group and I have this industrial policy, this is a debate on who is going to ruin the country and let the evil predatory immigrants take over, or who is going to harm democracy so much so that the country will become a dictatorship. Each side creates an apocalyptic and conspiratorial vision of what the other side is up to so as to motivate them to engage, maybe to fight apathy, but just because that seems to be how the internet interacts with modern politics, and the race being constantly in your pocket with social media and text leads to these unique ways of storytelling, which are conspiracy theories motivated for maximum fear and to cause maximum action. So today we are going to examine different ways to dissect the hidden meaning of popular conspiracies. In this complex and multi-layered task, I am honored to be joined by one of the world's foremost authority on conspiracy theories, Professor Joe Uszynski, Associate Professor of Political Science at the University of Miami, author of Conspiracy Theories, a Primer, and editor of Conspiracy Theories and the People Who Believe Them. So, Joe, let's jump right into the topic. Your research has shown that there have always been lots of conspiracy theories, but that belief in core conspiracy theories like who killed JFK was actually higher in the past. So what's different about how conspiracy theories work today? Is it that the people in power are spreading the conspiracy theories rather than just the people out of power?
I think a lot of people, when you ask them what's different about conspiracy theories today, they'll immediately jump to social media or the internet. But it's not clear that those have really made people believe conspiracy theories more. They just allowed people who already believe it to access it easier. I think what's sort of changed is that we now have the dominant wing of one of the two major political parties in the US pushing conspiracy theories. You always expect this on the fringe in the US, where we only have two major parties, and one of them all of a sudden becomes a conspiracy party and the other one sort of reacts by becoming an anti-conspiracy party. Now it's very different than anything I experienced growing up in the 80s, 90s, and anything up until Trump got in.
Why are so many conspiracy theories across Europe and North America focused specifically on groups like immigrants and Jews or foreigners? And they peddle the falsehood that immigrants are the root of our social evils. The immigrants cause inflation. The immigrants lead to expensive housing. The immigrants are the reason that it's difficult to get an NHS appointment.
Well, I wouldn't call most of that conspiracy theory. I would just call it you don't like immigrants. And maybe some of the things you believe about immigrants are true, some are false. I don't think, and I think that a lot of data backs me up, that immigrants, I don't think they're the cause of crime or a lot of the problems they're blamed for. When we get into the area of saying, well, there's lots of immigrants here, it's making life worse for us, and it's all been planned by some powerful group, whether it's the Jews or the corporations or someone in the government, now we're getting into the realm of conspiracy theory.
So the Jews control global finance, or the Jews control the media, which they're using to push the hoax of climate change to sell lithium batteries. That's a conspiracy theory. But the idea that the immigrants are causing inflation and making it difficult for you to get an NHS appointment is not a conspiracy theory?
No, you're just making a claim about supply and demand.
Fascinating.
Yeah. So if you were to take out immigrants and put in any other thing, right? I live in a town. It's all of a sudden hard to find a place to rent. And I said, oh, it's all the college students in the town that made it hard for me to find a place to rent. There's no conspiracy theory there. I'm just making a comment on why is it hard to find a place to live in, given that there's a whole bunch of people here that weren't here before.
Okay, that's really interesting. But I was trying to highlight the fact that it's been proven that inflation is not increased by having more immigrants. In fact, in the US and UK, we have a labor shortage. And part of the reason we have inflation is that there are not enough immigrants to do a range of not only menial, but also skilled jobs. So I'm getting at the illogic of it.
So what?
Okay.
Right. I mean, so for it to be a conspiracy theory, it has to have two things, right? It has to be a substantive aspect of the theory that someone is conspiring to do something, right? They're working in secret for their own benefit against the common good in a way that undermines our bedrock ground rules against the widespread use of force and fraud. The other aspect is that this theory has yet to be determined to be true by the appropriate epistemological authorities, meaning could be true, but the people who would determine if it is have yet to say that it is, right? So with your statements about immigrants, you're just simply saying, well, these are things that people say, but they're false. Well, okay, it's false things, but you're not alleging that there's some string puller doing it purposely for some benefit for themselves and to harm others.
Thanks for that clarification. That was very convincing and compelling, Joe. So the Great Replacement theory is a conspiracy theory because it postulates that Jews are somehow letting Latin Americans into America and Middle Easterners into Europe to dilute the white race. That's a conspiracy theory. But the idea that immigrants are causing inflation in the UK is not a conspiracy theory. It's just potentially a factually false claim.
Yeah, because it's not like the immigrants, when trying to rent a place to live in with their family, are like, hey, I have a plan. Let's increase inflation by moving in. They're not taking a coordinated effort to do that, right? So, yes, you find a lot of people blaming immigrants and other groups for all sorts of things. They're not always alleging a conspiracy.
Excellent. So then conspiracy goes quite well with the Jews, going back to the protocols of the Elders of Zion and all sorts of George Soros stuff. How have you seen that domain change since 2016 with the kind of increasing salience of white nationalism in the U.S.?
Well, anti-Semitism has been around for a long, long time. And part of the reason why Jews make a great conspirator in conspiracy theories is because a lot of people see them as quite powerful and as an other. So you put those two things together and then it becomes, well, who knows what they're up to when we're not looking. So it's easy to say, well, they secretly control the FBI, they control movies, they control this, that, and the other thing. And so many conspiracy theories that are popular, often if you trace them back, there is a tinge of anti-Semitism going on, even if it's not explicitly saying the Jews do this or the Jews do that. If you take like the Wall Street conspiracy theories or the 1% conspiracy theories, often for a lot of people, that means the Jews. If you're talking about the Rothschilds, not everyone will know, oh, the Rothschilds are a Jewish banking family, but a lot of people do. You can get to an anti-Semitic conspiracy theory without necessarily being anti-Semitic.
I have heard right-wing Jews in my presence say George Soros is drumming up the pro-Palestinian protesters to try to take over the government. And I remember saying to the gentleman in question, you understand that's absurd? You've just made a variant of an anti-Semitic conspiracy theory that suits you. And he said, no, but he really is doing it.
But I wouldn't say your friend is necessarily anti-Semitic, right? He could just be parroting all the stuff that he's hearing on all these channels. And of course he says to you, and this is a really important point, is that people don't believe conspiracy theories because they know they're false, but they pretend to believe them anyway just to annoy us. People come to very different beliefs about the world, and it's very hard for everyone to step out of our own shoes and into the shoes of someone who believes completely different things. So I don't doubt that your friend truly believed some other thing. And in a lot of ways, we all live in our own little reality. It's just the problem that we have isn't just that we all come to different beliefs, sometimes wrong beliefs. It's that most people are unwilling to buy the idea that so many of our beliefs aren't the product of a direct access to truth. Everything that we experience and feel and understand, everything we hear about is mediated somehow through something, whether it's at least our own psychologies and our own senses, but often through social institutions like the media or our friends or, who knows what. But he's probably getting really good information about Soros doing all these things, just as good as the information you and I might get about some other thing. Right? So he's convinced that this is what's really going on, and he's got the evidence. And there's often this assumption out there, particularly in the last few years, that people go on social media, they get exposed to a conspiracy theory, they're immediately persuaded of its truthfulness, and then they go out and act somehow on it. And it's this clear through line between exposure, belief, and then behavior. And that's, you and I have lots of beliefs that we're not going to act on. I believe a lot of things. I'm not going to do anything about it today, or maybe any day. Doesn't mean I don't believe it, right? And even if I did act a certain way and happen to hold a certain belief, it doesn't mean that the belief caused the behavior. Sometimes we will find that people don't want to get vaccinated. They will refuse vaccination, and then they'll start believing conspiracy theories after the fact to justify their not getting vaccinated. And it could be very well the case, too, that you hate a particular minority group, and then to justify your racism, you adopt conspiracy theories about that minority group. So in that sense, the conspiracy theories are just a symptom of the problem. They're not the problem itself.
That was very well put. I'm convinced by this. I think that in many cases, the conspiracy theory is the cover for an otherwise seemingly indefensible action. You actually dislike needles, so you didn't want to do the vaccine, but then you say, aha, I think Bill Gates puts microchips in them, to justify to yourself and to your friends, because you would otherwise be a wussy who just doesn't like the needle, and you can't articulate that even to yourself. I know a researcher at King's College London, Dr. Rod Dackholm, who argues that conspiracy theories entail action. And what makes them a conspiracy theory is that they entail action. He's studied The Light magazine, which is a conspiratorial British publication, and he looks at it from how the nature of the conspiracy theories are predicated on driving you further down the rabbit hole. And the further you go down the rabbit hole, the more you're going to be motivated to do action, either to cause violence or just to vote a certain way or go to protests. I'm popping a link in the show notes from the BBC's The Science of Conspiracy, Mariana in Conspiracy Land, which is an interview with Dr. Rod Dacombe, and it hits at that point. So I'd like to jump into the meat of this discussion. I've dragged you on here today, Joe, with a bit of a surreptitious agenda. I have a conspiracy to try to come up with a unified field theory of how to unlock the meaning of conspiracy theories. And to help guide the discussion, I'd like to sketch out 6 theories or rough baskets of ideas, which I believe unpick the meaning of the most prevalent conspiracy theories. And I'd like to hear your thoughts, Joe. What do I mean by the most prevalent conspiracy theories? I don't mean the ones that you poll for, whether it's like JFK or aliens. I mean things like the 2020 election was stolen, or the upcoming election is going to be rigged, or the immigrants are taking your jobs to drive up housing prices, which I understand may not be a conspiracy theory, so we can unpack that later. Great replacement theory, the idea that the deep state controls the government, or George Soros runs the world, or the idea that Jews run the media and the global economy. So I mentioned these 6 possible concepts, and I'm going to start with the first one, which is playing back your theory back to you. Basket 1, conspiracy theories are for losers. I heard this idea brilliantly articulated by you, Joe. I had thought of it, but I never summed it up so concisely. This is the idea that the conspiracy theory expresses a coherent worldview that those without economic or political power are being unfairly screwed over, and that there is an in-group who is manipulating global affairs to harm or suppress an out-group. Tell me more about your theory of conspiracy theory are for losers and how we can unpick the kinds of conspiracy theories that I mentioned earlier.
Well, did you ever watch a sports game and then at the end of the match, you realize that the referees, they make a lot of bad calls, but the bad calls always go against your team? Kind of weird how that works. Of course, the fan of the other team says the same thing.
Usually it's only the fan of the losing team who says it.
Well, after the game. So who's upset after the game? It's rarely the winners. It's always the losers. Who was it rigged against? The losers, not the winners. For the winners, everything's hunky-dory. For the losers, they were cheated. Now, not for all losers, but for some. And for those people, it's much easier to say we were cheated, things were rigged against us, than it is to look in a mirror and say, well, we just got beat. Right? It's the same with politics. It's a lot of people wake up the morning after the election and say, well, you know, our team really was better, and the other side only won because they cheated and they rigged it against us. So that happens after elections. It can happen more long-term in the sense that people who are sort of on the outside of society will say, well, you know, there's a lot of rich people out there. I'm not one of them. There's a lot of insiders out there. I'm not one of them. A lot of people with power and control. I don't have any of it. The system must have been rigged against me. Right? And we find evidence of that the people in that situation are more likely to have a conspiratorial worldview.
For sure. Can we use this to unpick a little bit more of how today's neo-populist right uses conspiracy theories, be they about the 2020 election, or about immigrants, or about Jews, or about non-whites in general? Because I feel like these conspiracy theories are very attractive if you feel like your country, Britain or America, is being changed by people who don't look like you, and you don't accept that maybe people who don't look like you should have, you know, wealth and status, and you want to have that for yourself.
Well, in that sense, you don't necessarily have to be a loser. You don't have to be on the outside. So there's 2 things going on here. You can have a lot of people who just have a stable conspiratorial worldview, such that when they look out their window in the morning, what they're seeing is this is what's going on in the world, and a lot of it's probably being caused by conspiracies pulled off by people who I already don't like to do things that I don't like. So yeah, some of the being on the outside and being a loser is somewhat in there. And again, I'm using the word loser not as a pejorative, but as a descriptive. Someone on the outside of whoever they think is pulling the strings. But the people who are going to be most prone to that are going to be people who already have that worldview. And just because they wind up winners doesn't necessarily mean it goes away.
Which we've seen when Trump was in office. Even when his people had won, they still said that the deep state was out to get them and all that, right?
And it made perfect sense. I mean, he was legitimately an outsider to politics. He'd never held political office before. It did look in a lot of ways to even reasonable people that he was being treated very poorly by the Republican establishment. Some people said, oh, he was being unfairly investigated by the government during the campaign. People say he got very terrible media coverage. Now, maybe all of that was earned, but people could look at it and say, well, geez, he really does look like a victim. And he does look like an outsider, and it does match his narrative.
And it's a great worldview to promote if you as the political leader have done a lot of wrong things, like, say, pay off a porn star with campaign money or try to get someone in Georgia to give you 11,000 votes. Because if you have all your believers and followers say, you know what, the deep state is out to get him, anything that they say about him is just created. It's a genius coating of armor to protect you from actually having to face the music for when you do things wrong.
And that happens all the time. It's when people get accused of something, they'll often turn around and say, well, this is all part of a scheme to get me. I think Mayor Adams of New York just did this recently. He said, oh, I wasn't really taking bribes. It's my political enemies targeting me. Right? But we see it throughout history. It's when people get accused of things, they'll turn around and say, well, you think I'm doing something wrong. Well, wait till you look at the person who's lodging the accusation, because they're trying to then turn it around back on them.
So let's move on to theory 2. Conspiracy theories contain some underlying truths or hint at some uncertainties that might not otherwise be called attention to, and that the listener or believer, it resonates with them. They just exaggerate to some extreme, drawing on something which is true and interesting, but blowing it completely out of proportion for their interests. So we know that probably per capita Jews are overrepresented in the US and UK medias. And we know that when the COVID vaccine was launched, 1 in a million people had weird side effects. So the conspiracy theory calls attention to a slight truth, but blows it out of proportion in a way that helps the listener understand or grapple with something.
Yeah, I mean, I think every conspiracy theory has some truth to it. The word some is doing a lot of work there, right? Like, I even think lizard people theories have some truth. I mean, lizards exist, people exist. There's some evidence from the field of physics that there could be other dimensions. And I think that's part of the theory that the lizards are coming in and out of, this dimension. And if you want me to talk about your side of the pond, I mean, Alex Jones is my guy over here in the US, but David Icke is your guy over there. And he's got tons of books that are very, very long. And you could probably see a couple of them on my shelf. And he will say, I have tons of evidence for my theory. So there's some evidence, right? It's just the question then becomes, how do we interpret that evidence? Do we take that evidence to show that the theory is entirely true, or is it just that evidence doesn't really get us to buy into that theory?
But I'm trying to draw out what the implication or meaning of the some truth is. In other words, let's say that you heard something in the newspaper that someone had a bizarre side effect of the COVID vaccine, and you're genuinely afraid, even though it says this only happens to 1 in a million people. So you believe a crazy theory that, Bill Gates puts microchips in them and they are causing people to, have horrible consequences and be tracked by the police and stuff, because you're drawing on a little bit of truth that helps you somehow grapple with this piece of information.
I mean, what you gave me as your second, like the first premise was good because it was mine and it's very short. Conspiracy theories are for losers. The second one is like really long in how you presented it. And it has a lot of things in there that are sort of like,
Okay.
a little bit of truth. Well, what does that mean? And then, people buy it because whatever reason. And so a lot of what you're saying there are sort of phrases that are very subjective to me. So I don't know what it's actually doing for us.
Okay.
So you went from the truth value behind the theory to then why are people buying it?
Great. Let's just say touche and move on to the next one. So number 2, we can have an X. 3, conspiracy theories are entertainment. I mean, lizard people run the world, Jewish space lasers, or there's an underground pizza parlor, that there's a sex trafficking ring, that somehow these are funny and engaging in the way that like an amazing joke is. And a joke is like a meme. People tell it to each other and it just spreads around. That somehow these things are viral in their entertainment value. And whatever is the most amusing leads to the greatest spread. And there's an extent to which in today's politics, people vote for Trump because they find him to be entertaining, not even because they necessarily think he's going to be a great president, so that somehow entertainment value leads to actions.
I wouldn't say that Holocaust denial is entertaining. I wouldn't say that the idea that there's a conspiracy of gay and trans people to molest and sexually harm kids is entertaining. I think there are a lot of conspiracy theories that I personally wouldn't find entertaining. Maybe someone else would find them entertaining.
But I think some people are twisted and do find those things entertaining, Joe.
They could, but then I wouldn't say these are entertaining. What I would say is some people will find them entertaining, right? And everyone's going to pick and choose what ones are entertaining to them, right? So I might find some entertaining, but certainly not the ones that I just mentioned. So there could be entertainment value there, no doubt. And I'm sure that there are some people who maybe aren't really believers, but they like the genre of conspiracy theory because they find them entertaining. And they're there for fun, not there for truth seeking.
But the more elaborate a conspiracy theory like QAnon, and I know that you know much more about this than I do, to want to get deeper into the Q rabbit hole, does it not scratch an itch the way that like a really interesting TV series or detective novel does, that there is a kind of entertainment value the more that you engage and you go down this rabbit hole?
But most people weren't racing to 8chan or 4chan to get their Q drops. QAnon itself was never very popular in the US, and the headlines vastly overestimated its size, with some saying it was bigger than the Tea Party, it's as big as a major religion in the US, that it had taken over the world. And I've been polling on it since 2018 and never found any evidence of this. So I'm sure for the people who were in it, there was some entertainment value. And you could tell that because there are people who go and get the Q drops, try and decipher them, talk to other people in the community. So they were having fun doing it, right? But again, this was sort of a fringe thing.
I'm less concerned about how fringe a thing is than you. In other words, even if only 0.01% of people believes it, I'm interested if for that 0.01% of people it causes an action, because if that action is disordering, we're going to come back to that in our ordering the disorder. I think it's relevant somehow.
But let me just stop you there, because this is a really important point. Oftentimes when we read about conspiracy theories, we're doing what social scientists call selecting on the dependent variable. And this is what journalists do a lot. They'll say, somebody did something bad today, and then they go backward from that to the conspiracy theory and say, aha, the conspiracy theory causes people to kill people, to attack the Capitol, to do whatever, right? And they forget about all the people who believe that theory, but don't do any action on it. I mean, right now, polls are showing that you get between 50 and 80% of Republicans saying they think 2020 was rigged, right? Which is like a third of the country. But a third of the country didn't attack the Capitol on January 6th. Most people who believe that the election was rigged stayed home on January 6th and either, hung out at home or went to work. So it's just not the case that beliefs always lead to action. If you want to talk about the people who are committing action, now we're getting into something a little bit different, and we're not so much talking about just the conspiracy theories. We're talking about people. And we're getting into the idea that some people don't have a problem doing violence and smashing things.
Okay, to sum up, basket one, conspiracy theories are for losers, which is Joe's theory. Joe really likes and endorses. Basket two, conspiracy theories contain certain underlying truths which resonate in a certain way. We've mostly debunked that as relevant. Basket three, conspiracy theories are entertainment. They may be in some cases, but so what? Now, after the break, mega orderers, please hear my pet theory of conspiracy theories. Join me after the break.
The World with Richard Engel and Yalda Hakim is a brand new podcast from Sky News. With me, Sky News' lead world news presenter, Yalda Hakim.
And me, Richard Engel, chief foreign correspondent for NBC News.
Every week, we'll be reporting from the front line of the world's trouble spots and asking the big questions to the world's most important and influential people.
Join us for the ground truth to help you understand what is happening in the world today and why it matters to you.
So that's The World with Richard Engel and Yalda Hakim.
Listen every Wednesday, wherever you get your podcasts.
And we're back. What is the meaning of conspiracy theories? How can we unpack them to grasp the information they convey, the actions that they might or might not compel people to engage in? And finally, mega orderers, you're going to hear my pet theory. And this is something that I've been working on for many years, long before 2016, when I encountered in the Middle East lots of conspiracy theories about 9/11 denial or about America going into Iraq, not just to get the oil, but to deliberately get its own people killed and to have a disaster so that the world would be screwed up, blah, 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 blah. So this is that conspiracy theories are symbolic and multi-layered, and that they are carefully crafted mostly by intellectuals and elites, and that they are Maimonidean in that they encode critical so-called truths in a multi-layered way, causing political action or belief which cannot be articulated in direct language. I believe this theory is critical to explain why the wealthiest and most sophisticated people on earth, from Elon Musk to Trump to J.D. Vance to Farage, frequently articulate conspiracy theories that we know intellectually they must know to be factually false. So I am arguing that someone like Elon Musk, when he tweets something about the great replacement theory, he knows that it is not literally true, but he may believe that it is symbolically true, or it articulates a call to action for a political program that he believes to be true. What I'm pointing out here is a kind of double truth theorem of the kind that Averroes, Ibn Rushd, the medieval Muslim scholar, puts forth, which is that a given piece of information can be said to be true even though it is literally false, but idiots or moronic simpletons will take the literal text of the thing to be true, which is false, and act a certain way, but the educated or the philosophers understand that it is the more metaphorical meaning which is entailed. So what do you think about this way of unpacking conspiracy theories?
Maybe for some people. But again, I mean, I'm a social scientist, so I don't want to sound really anal. But it's like when like the first one you had conspiracy theories are for losers, I could tell you exactly what that means and how I apply it. Here you've got a lot of different parts and talking about terms that I don't really know what they mean, like, oh, it's multi-layered. That doesn't mean anything to me. You're telling me that you know what some people know in their head. I have no way of knowing what people know to be true. So, yeah, maybe the case that some people don't literally believe certain things they claim to believe. That's not just conspiracy theories. There's a lot of things in life where people will say things that they symbolically support, but maybe don't fully support in action or otherwise. I don't know where that gets us.
Okay, obviously this is my theory. I find it very compelling. The point is, it's difficult to grasp why someone would say something like, they're eating the pets in Springfield, Ohio without much evidence, or the Jews are secretly bringing in immigrants from Latin America to dilute the white race, which many elites and Elon Musk knows is clearly not technically true. But I am saying that whether it's Trump or Vance or Musk, they believe that the political program which is entailed has truth or veracity to, for example, take back the country or take back control. But these theories about people's having their pets eaten or great replacement theory, although not literally true, to them has a metaphorical meaning, but it can gain adherence for this course of action. And therefore, it operates in exactly the way that Ibn Rushd of Erwes says double truth theorem is to operate, that there is a literal meaning and a metaphorical meaning behind a truth claim.
Well, I mean, just the cat and dog one, the fact that a certain group of people might be eating cats and dogs, to me, is not a conspiracy theory. If you say it's being covered up or that it's part of somebody's intentional plan, then sure. But if you don't like immigrants, and then the leader of your party says, well, the immigrants are stealing your cats and dogs and eating them, that would be a symbolic belief. I might not say, well, they're not after my cat or my dog, and they're not going to eat my dog, and who knows how many dogs they got, right? And if you saw some of this discussion play out on Twitter, people were just grasping for any example of any dog anywhere going missing at any time to try to back up the theory. Sure, it's going to resonate with people who aren't so concerned about dogs in Springfield, Ohio, but just they have a general view about immigrants, and this seems to express that view in a punchy, up-to-date way, and it's what your political leader is saying. So you don't necessarily have to care about the claim itself. You care about what it's pointing to.
That's exactly what I'm saying. You don't have to care about whether the dogs were eaten or not. The symbolic truth is you feel that immigrants are so dangerous and perversive to the social fabric, it's as if they're eating your dogs.
Yeah, for some people, that may be the case. I don't think that all people who believe in whatever conspiracy theory do it purely symbolically.
They may not know that they're doing it symbolically. That's the double truth theorem bit, which is that for the morons who will believe it literally, it works in one way. But for others who are willing to just grasp the symbolic call to action, it works in another way, and that it has this ability to unite the Elon Musks of the world who may, tweet the thing out, and then the various simpletons who literally believe it to be true.
Yeah, and again, even what you're saying would only apply in cases, I guess, where it's sort of top-down propagation of the conspiracy theory. And I think it's really important to sort of draw this distinction between media elites, politicians, social media moguls, those sorts of people who maybe they believe the things they say, maybe they don't. It's hard to know what they do and don't believe because they're just individuals who I don't have any contact with.
But J.D. Vance actually told us that he made this statement knowing that it was probably not true. So I think that was...
So you can find some instances where that happens. Like we know that Tucker didn't believe the election was rigged because we have his texts. We know that Alex Jones didn't think that Sandy Hook was faked because we have his texts and his private email.
But I think that we can weave together these bits of information that Alex Jones, Tucker Carlson, and J.D. Vance have essentially exposed to us that key conspiracy theories or truth claims that they put forward to their audiences, they knew to not be true. So then that leads to the question, why did they say them? And I'm articulating a approach that unpacks why they might have said them, which is that they think that the belief that the election was rigged or that the immigrants eat your cats and dogs entails a symbolic and multi-layered action that is of political salience for these people. In other words, you can't say, I don't believe that newly naturalized foreigners or blacks should have the right to vote, because that's not something that if you're the head of a major political party, you can articulate.
Sure, but they could do it with things that aren't conspiracy theories too. You can do that with all sorts of stuff. It doesn't have to be a conspiracy theory.
Okay. I think that we have unpacked different aspects of this. To sum up, for me, I need to understand why given conspiracy theories are articulated by people who may not actually believe them to be true, like Tucker Carlson saying the election was rigged when he knows full well that it wasn't, and It's compelling for me as a way to understand it because he believes that it has a truth claim towards an action, even though it's not literally true. So this segues into basket 5. All conspiracy theories are somehow a call to action, whether it's just action of believing a anti-establishment view or believing that you shouldn't trust the government. How do you analyze this?
Well, this is a definitional question. If you want to define it that way, then go for it, and other people will define it differently. So that's purely what you're arguing here, is that I think that conspiracy theories have to have this element to them. Well, okay.
Okay. We can get quickly through that one. Basket 6. Like religion, conspiracy theories are actually about social control and elite dominance, and that, like all kinds of organized religion, the existence of these conspiracy theories catch people and put them in a position whereby belief in the insane conspiracy theory makes you more susceptible to larger forms of social control.
So conspiracy theories are themselves part of a conspiracy done by elites to control the masses.
Correct.
Well, I would call that a conspiracy theory. I think they often call it a meta-conspiracy theory, that conspiracy theories themselves are part of some plot.
I'm a very meta person, as all the mega orderers will know. How do you assess this claim?
Well, a lot of conspiracy theories are also bottom-up, and they're designed to challenge the establishment, because often conspiracy theories are a critique of power. Who has that power? What are they doing when we're not looking? And often, in some instances, not all, but some, it can be a call to action. It could be, hey, we got to look out for this enemy who's doing bad things. You know, they're doing stuff in secret. It's not good for us because we're in the outgroup. And we need to be especially vigilant and vocal. And we need to get them out of power so we can get someone like ourselves in power.
Does a prevalence of conspiracy theories on a given subject, say the climate, lead to ineffective policy towards issue like the climate? And does lots of conspiracy theories about immigrants make it maybe more difficult for policymakers and elected officials to actually deal with things like border control or immigration?
It can. It doesn't necessarily have to. So conspiracy theories can be a symptom of other things, right? So if that's the case, it's not really the conspiracy theory that's harming policy or harming the implementation of policy. It could be that underlying worldview that's leading to both resistance against policymaking and implementation, and then also giving rise to the more specific conspiratorial beliefs. So again, a lot of this comes down to is where do we put the conspiracy theories in the causal chain? And I don't think there's one answer to that. I think in different instances, they'll be in different places. I think they can lead to disorder in lots of ways. They are disruptive ideas because they're accusing usually a center of power, the establishment, of doing something bad. So it is a critique of major institutions and the normal way of doing things. At the same time, they can be positive. And I'll be honest, I don't want to live in a world without conspiracy theories because simply having order doesn't mean the order is good. Simply having establishment doesn't mean the establishment is good. There are instances where having conspiracy theorists who are dogmatic and won't give up their beliefs have led to positive things. Like we have a lot more information about the JFK assassination now, a lot more information about 9/11 now because of conspiracy theorists screaming, we want more transparency and information, and that is a social good.
Now to get to the kind of more concrete solutions bit, in your expert opinion, how can we lance the boil of conspiracy theories in general, whether it's on social media or just as a motivating nexus for these anti-immigrant, anti-Semitic constituencies, anti-minority? What would you suggest as ways in public policy to try to lance the boil here?
So I don't think I'd want to lance the boil. I mean, as I said, I don't want to live in a world without them because I think they are, at their core, an important critique of power and of the establishment. And sometimes they are warranted. Sometimes they're not. So what we need to do is be very careful about which ones we want to get rid of and which ones we're going to allow to stay. If we give that power to government, Well, the ones they're going to want to get rid of are the ones that accuse themselves. And the ones they're going to want to keep are the ones that accuse their political competitors. So I'm not comfortable giving that sort of power to government because it will be used for self-serving reasons.
That is a very American answer for you.
I can't get away from the fact that I'm an American.
I mean, I'm an American, but I have a more European answer of wanting to have international bodies and institutions and government make those decisions.
About what we can and can't say?
About what kinds of misinformation or conspiratorial thinking online is policed. Yes. But that's a more European answer. I don't believe in the American obsession with free speech.
So my view is that you have to have a justification for what you're going to take down. So if you said, I want to get rid of conspiracy theories because they cause problems, then you got to show, well, there's an infinite number of conspiracy theories out there. Which ones cause problems, and can you show it? How do we know that it's a cause of a problem and not just a symptom of some other thing that you don't really feel like dealing with? You just want to deal with the flashy thing. And then you have to deal with the issue, too, of is it true or not? So now we have to run around figuring out if every conspiracy theory is true, but generally people just start censoring, and then we'll figure out if it's true or not.
So you're putting forth a John Stuart Mill, let's let all of the truth claims compete in the open marketplace of ideas. That's good. I like that. Two last questions. How about the anti-expert bias that has manifested itself in the Anglo-American right? I don't remember growing up in a world where people who were conservative disliked experts. In fact, I thought that the more you would be conservative, the more you would trust the experts, be they the military or the politicians. So is there anything that we should do in your mind to restore trust to experts to deal with problems like AI regulation, climate change, Middle East peace? Because the way I read these things, we need more expert knowledge than ever before, rather than trying to vilify experts, as many of the conspiracy theories do.
Well, I agree with you. I mean, I am pro-expert. I think we need more experts and we need more expert knowledge. And for that reason, we should be supportive of building that knowledge with our public policy. That's a separate question of what do we do about anti-expert conspiracy theories. And that's also a separate question from how do we rebuild trust in experts. I don't trust all experts. I mean, I go and do a journal article and get it published. And oftentimes my articles are calling into question other articles that other experts, just as much expert as me, have written. So one of the things we do amongst experts is to challenge each other openly, often. And that's how we build knowledge. And I don't think I'd feel comfortable saying, well, you have to trust everything experts say and you can't question that. Right? I give a lot of deference.
Joe, if you were king for a day and could propose a global institution to fight the most malicious conspiracy theories, because we know you want some conspiracy theories out there, how would it function and what would it do?
Well, I am not going to be able to answer that because you already pointed out I'm an American, which puts me, a couple steps away from European thought on these matters. And I'm an American libertarian, which puts me way out there. So, when I go to London and meet with the Adam Smith Society, they usually say, oh yeah, the American libertarians, they're a bunch of nutters. So even as far as libertarian in Britain goes, I'm off out in the outer space. So I probably would not want a global NATO to deal with conspiracy theories.
Okay, well, you heard it here first. Maybe conspiracy theories are something which don't need an international institution to deal with them. It's been a real pleasure having you on Disorder, Joe.
Thank you so much.
Well, I guess some libertarians don't want to do any mega ordering, so I am going to propose a global institution, a NATO to fight conspiracy theories. I think that conspiracy theories are quite the big deal these days because they entail anti-establishment action, because neo-populist leaders actively propagate them, and because they've become part and parcel of our enduring disorder. I see conspiracy theories as the spear tip in the misinformation weapon, and that it would be useful to have a NATO, in other words, an international body of countries and institutions and social media companies and media organizations that was actively trying to push into the public consciousness the reasons why the more malicious of these beliefs is not true. Whether that's fighting anti-Semitic ideas, or if it's things like the COVID vaccine is on purpose putting a microchip into you so Bill Gates can spy on you. I think we do need to have bodies that are publicly funded to fight these conspiracies, because otherwise citizens are going down rabbit holes and they believe stuff that is very, very detrimental to the public weal. If you agree with me, you are a mega orderer. So you should tap follow now so you get every episode when it's launched. If you want to hear more about conspiracy theories and more about my theory that conspiracy theories are Maimonidean and have a double truth theorem aspect to them, you should subscribe to our Substack, where we are going to talk more about that. And the link to the Substack is in the show notes. Also, for a touch of housekeeping, mega orderers, please do not forget to subscribe to our Substack, because tomorrow, October 23rd, my birthday, we are celebrating with our second episode on backgammon and politics, with the racy content interviewing the former world champion of backgammon, Sander Liloff. It's enjoyable. You can get it only on the Substack. It's for free. You can upgrade if you want to the pay-for Substack, but just subscribe for free and hear Sander talk more about backgammon and politics. As always, our producer has been the one, the only, the George McDonough. Our executive producer is Neil Fern. I hope you have an orderly and conspiratorial-free week.